Valentine's Day. One of the best days of the year if you're in a relationship, and one of the worst if you're a lonely soul. Valentine's Day is the annual reminder that human beings are social creatures, and as social creatures, we should be seeking out relationships with other human beings. Romance, the pursuit of an intimate relationship, isn't just about reproduction, but about finding the perfect partner in life with whom we can share in our triumphs and victories, and with whom we can rely upon to overcome the challenges that come our way. Romance, then, is an essential part of the human experience, which makes it an equally essential part of storytelling. But, in recent years, there are many who have come to look down upon one of the most essential aspects of being human. There are many who say that good stories don't need romance, or that romance is nothing more than a trashy element that ruins otherwise great stories. This Valentine's Day, I'm here to argue otherwise, to dispel the lies and show you just how important romance is to storytelling. Join us here at Mercenary Publishing for this special discussion on why romance is essential in storytelling. The more things change, the more they stay the same. While romance has been an essential part of literature and storytelling ever since humans started telling tall tales, it has always been easy to pick on the romantic elements of storytelling. Critics have always tackled the subject from just about any and every angle. Conservatives deride romance for promoting smut and sexual infidelity, while liberals deride romance for promoting heterosexual normative and biased familial expectations. Highborn writers would deride romance for being unimaginative and reducing storytelling to the mundane and ordinary, while the common folk would often claim that romance fiction was exploitative and an unrealistic depiction of their actual ordinary lives. The stereotypical image of a romance writer isn't kind, and words like shrew or pervert are often among the first used to associate with those who focus on writing romantic stories. Public polling would likely lead you to believe that romance, and especially romantic elements, are no longer needed in storytelling. We can hardly go a year without seeing polls like this one from the UCLA Teens and Screens study. According to them, 40 to 45% of teenage to young adult audiences want to see less romance in the media they consume. With the young adult audience being so split on romance, surely it's a sign that storytellers would be better off pivoting away from it as a storytelling element, right? Nope, not at all. Young adult audiences may claim they dislike romance being a core element in storytelling, but the truth of the matter is in the media the mainstream audience consumes. Here are some interesting stats about romantic elements in modern fiction. Let's start off with this interesting fact. Audiobook listeners, by and large, are drawn to romantic elements. According to Axios, 23% note that romance is the number one element they look for in a story when looking for a new audiobook to listen to. How about this? The vast majority of American audiences love or like romantic elements in their movies. 70%, in fact, according to polling done by YouGov. While romance is seen as a less essential component compared to other story elements like comedy, action, and drama, 7 out of 10 people saying it is a positive element in movies shows that romance is far from dead. Now let's turn our attention to the online fan community and the content they create. An overwhelming amount of fan fiction is dedicated to exploring romantic relationships between characters, especially those relationships that aren't depicted in the source material. How many times have you seen fan art of such relationships, or perhaps even wandered into a so-called shipping war? Of course, we have to talk about video games as well. Persona is the most popular video game franchise published by Atlas, But what separates it from their other series like Shin Megami Tensei are the social and romantic aspects. Baldur's Gate 3 released to critical acclaim a few years ago, and the most popular videos and guides at the time were all about how to romance specific party members. Fire Emblem Awakening revitalized the Fire Emblem series, its popularity in no small part due to the increased focus on pairing off characters and creating families within the strategy game. Dating sims are a genre unto themselves. Romance is the main draw of visual novels, and it's interesting to note that one of the first questions developers always get asked about their games is whether they can romance X or Y character. And yet, despite the prevalence and popularity of romance, many storytellers go out of their way to downplay or ignore romantic elements in their storytelling. Romance is at the heart of the first 6 Star Wars movies, but it is barely a component of the sequel trilogy and various TV shows developed by Disney. Metaphor ReFantasio was meant to be a more fantasy-style take on Persona, and yet it stripped out the romantic elements that make Persona so popular. The Outer Worlds 2 even advertised their game by making fun of people looking for romance in their role-playing game. So, romance has always had a fraught relationship with storytellers, no matter the era. The greatest movies of all time frequently have romance as a core element, be it Citizen Kane, Gone with the Wind, The Godfather, or Casablanca, and yet people still question whether you really need romantic subplots in modern movies. The best and most popular video games often feature romantic elements, but since Call of Duty and Fortnite don't have romance, many developers feel they don't need it in their games either. It's a huge draw for comic book readers to check out issues where superheroes are getting married or having children. And yet, comic book writers will split relationships up with no consideration for what drew their readers to their stories in the first place. Why? Why, despite knowing how popular romance is, not just as a genre, but as an element in all storytelling, do so many writers and storytellers reject romantic elements in the stories they're trying to tell? If I had to guess, writers can only tell stories about what they know and experience, and there are too many writers now who don't know the meaning of the word romance at all. What does love mean? We wouldn't have so many songs and stories about love if that was an easy answer. Love isn't something easily defined by the dictionary, and the fact we use one word to try and summarize all the different types, forms, and expressions of love is absurd. In this regard, I appreciate the Greeks and the fact that they had 8 different words for the different forms love can take, including romantic love, familial love, love for oneself, and more. In our day, people understand that the love you have for a friend, for a sibling, for a pet, for a hobby, for an interest, and for a cause are all different kinds of love. But the sad thing is, we now live in an era in which it is harder and harder than ever to find meaningful love. If it seems like it's harder to find stories with good romantic elements, especially compared to the movies and TV shows that were popular 50 to 100 years ago, well, blame it on the loveless world we now find ourselves in. All writers are essentially telling their audiences how they see the world with the stories they create. Sure, George Lucas made his name by telling a story set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but the so-called alien aspects on screen are just elements from the real world wearing different theatrical costumes. Jedi are space monks. Han Solo is a trucker. Chewbacca is the family dog. A lightsaber is just a glowing sword, and a blaster is a gun by another name. The reason we love George Lucas and Star Wars is because he told a story that takes the real world and presents it in a fresh new coat of paint. The same reason why we love The Lord of the Rings, Marvel, DC, and any other big and popular franchise out there. That's all fictional storytelling is. But fictional storytelling is dependent upon the writer's understanding of reality and what is possible. To be more precise, stories are highly influenced by the writer's lived experience. Guns didn't become a popular part of storytelling until they became a common part of global culture. People with dark skin didn't become common in European and Asian storytelling until African migrants became a part of their societies. Alternatively, certain genres like the Western have largely died off because there are so few people who live the cowboy experience in these modern days. I mention this because it makes it easier to understand where I'm going with the stats I'm about to share with you. Between 1950 to today, the marriage rate has dropped by half. The median age for first marriages has gone from 20 to 28 for women and 23 to 31 for men. The average children per woman was more than 3 in the United States, but has since dropped to 1.5 here in the United States. Less than 5% of children were born to unmarried parents in the 50s, compared to 40% in 2025. If writers are shying away from more romantic elements in their works, it is because many writers simply do not experience the typical romantic experience that was so common in the past. People are experiencing romance later in life, if at all, compared to their ancestors. People who do experience it will often experience it in a different way. Casual romance and untraditional relationships are more common than ever, which in turn changes the way romance is presented in the stories we engage with today. This is a good thing and a bad thing. Diversity is not just the spice of life, but the main thing that makes storytelling so engaging. The best thing about modern entertainment consumption is that we can go from one genre to another, one style of story to another, with little more than a swipe of a finger or a click of a button. It's hard to feel bored when you can experience the best in sci-fi, fantasy, historical fiction, action, mystery, and certainly romance whenever you feel like it. More stories are being told by more people than ever before, including stories that wouldn't have been possible in a more restrictive, less diverse society that was the world of the 1950s. At the same time, there is a reason why vanilla remains the most popular ice cream flavor, and why the most popular stories, even among the modern audience, is often the most basic and generic. In a world that is so diverse and often exotic, it is comforting to return to that which is standard and, dare I say it, normal. This is why many people often turn to the classics, why the stories of yesteryear compete with and continue to outsell the modern stories of today. Call it nostalgia, call it standardization, call it what you will, but changing the formula too much, especially when it comes to romance or the lack thereof in storytelling, just makes people look back with fondness. New Star Wars is a failure in many ways, but its triumph is that it makes people appreciate old Star Wars even more. Besides, romance just makes stories better in general. But before we tackle the final part of this romantic essay, why not consider reading a story full of romance? Roll the ad, Kolob.
Hey there, mercenary. Are you enjoying the great content produced by that dumbass Anthony? The best way to support the channel is by checking out our book series, The Mercenary Saga, a stylish character action story featuring vampire mercenaries working as they fight the forces of evil in this genre-blending tale. For this video, I want to promote The Mercenaries Crusade, a high fantasy novel inspired by Dark Souls, Fire Emblem, Berserk, and other fantasy stories. The evil man-devil Moncad has conquered Anorta and plagues the land with the miasma of deathless death. No one can die, but no one can grow. No one can have children, No one can have a purpose in a world that has lost all meaning. This cannot stand. And to fix the world, Heaven deploys the vampire warrior, Sky Crystal. To save the world, she'll have to bring death back to its cursed lands, all while trying to outrun the Grim Reaper chasing her. Can she do it? Can she save Anorta in the year of life she has left? Support the channel and enjoy the story of the Mercenary Saga. Back to the essay, Anthony.
Look at the greatest movies, TV shows, books, comics, and video games of all time. Make a list of each, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a common element that many of them share. After all, science fiction and fantasy have little to do with historical fiction or true crime. Nevertheless, there is one element of storytelling that you can find in almost any story considered by fans around the world to be the very best. It's romance. Romance, far more often than not, is a core element of the greatest stories ever told. There are several reasons why this is, each of which make romance an essential part of storytelling. The best stories are typically those with elements that are universally enjoyed by audiences no matter who they are. A story that can equally appeal to a rich trust fund kid in New York to a poor villager from Africa is a good story. But what can these two people from very different walks of life possibly have in common? Romance, because both of them are only alive because of romance. It is said that death and taxes are the only universal experiences in life, but make sure you add romance to the list. Human life cannot be born without a man expressing some sort of attraction and interest in a woman. Yes, it can and often does get messy, but every human who ever lives is the product of a romantic exchange and experience, no matter how brief. What is the meaning of life? What goals do we work towards from sunrise to sunset? People work to make money, but money in itself is merely a means to an end. So too is fame, for having influence over others isn't as important as what you use that influence for. Storytellers often get into trouble as they write about people seeking power, for what distinguishes good stories from bad ones is the answer to the question of what will the characters use their powers to obtain? Romance. Romance is often the easiest and best answer to all of the questions presented above. We make money to spend it to win the affections of those we desire. We seek influence and fame because it makes us into more attractive mates for those we desire. People seek to influence the law because it benefits or makes it possible to pursue a romance with those we desire. This is true for life, and this is true for the stories we tell about life. What is the Iliad, one of the oldest stories ever composed, but a war fought because of romance? What is the story of Genesis but the telling of the romance of our progenitors, Adam and Eve? Stories are worth listening to for the lessons they teach about life, and we can all use instruction when it comes to navigating the rivers of romance. Stories are so exciting because of the twists and turns, the tension and unexpected developments. And what better roller coaster is there than the ups and downs that come with a romance between characters? We go to stories because we want to feel something. And what invokes laughter and horror, delight and despair, lust and hate, quite like a romantic tale? Romance is storytelling at its best. More than any other genre, more than any other element, nothing makes a story as compelling or fulfilling as when romantic elements are involved. The proof is in the pudding. You make a list of the greatest stories of all time, you're going to find romantic elements in each and every one of them. It might not always be a traditional romance, a relationship between a man and a woman, but romance takes many forms, and in many stories, the romance is allegorical. The love for a sport, the relationship between friends, the hero's journey to save the world are all motivated and but expressions of romance in more subtle or indirect ways. Bringing us to the conclusion of my essay. As a writer, as a student, as someone who obsesses over the art of storytelling, I have realized over the years that there are very few rules of storytelling. Give me a common rule, and I can universally find a story that proves otherwise. However, after much consideration, I have come to realize that there are two rules that define what make a story great. Rule number one: if you're going to tell a story, make sure it's a story that you and you alone can tell. But rule number two: I just explained it with this video essay. You cannot tell a great story without romance. Romance elevates storytelling. Anything that makes a story more compelling, more emotionally charged, and more reflective of the human condition will always be a boon for stories. That is why it is disappointing that there are many who have such a negative perception when it comes to romance in storytelling. This is partially due to how romance is used. Like all things, a poison is but medicine, administered in too great and unhealthy a dose. Romance is often a great supporting element in many stories, but if it takes too much of the attention away from the main plot, it can be overbearing. Furthermore, romantic stories are often those that stray into porn, and defining the line between the two can be rather hard for a mature and adult audience. Pun intended. There is also an immaturity aspect when it comes to rejecting romance. I have read Pride and Prejudice 3 times in my life for school, the first when I was 14 and the last when I was 24. Whereas the teenage me hated it and having to read a romantic story, college me loved it and recognized why it is a treasured story for men and women alike. Similarly, whereas I derided stories like The Phantom of the Opera, The Great Gatsby, Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, and other stories with large romantic overtones in my youth, I recognize them as brilliant stories because of their romantic elements in my maturity. Romance is the essential core that makes the greatest stories ever told as great as they are. Star Wars, Final Fantasy, Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, Marvel, DC, nearly every great and popular franchise of the modern day is great in part because of romance. So to any writer enjoying this video essay, to any fan of storytelling with a hard heart, to everyone out there who wants better stories, listen up. Stop rejecting romance, embrace it, and seek romance in your own life too, mercenary. You'll find your life will be a whole lot more meaningful once you inject some romance into your own life.